But in the meantime, I would like to invite Beth. Beth from Journey Further is going to talk about setting your PR strategy on fire. I sadly missed Beth's talk at Brighton SEO a few weeks ago, so I'm really, really excited to see this talk. So without further ado, Beth, over to you. And yeah, we'll jump into some questions afterwards.
Thanks, James. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm not very good with technology. Let me try and share my screen. Okay, brilliant. Hopefully everybody can see that. So thank you. Yeah, today I'm going to be talking about how to set your digital PR strategy on fire. This is slightly different to my Brighton SEO talk, so it's more of an extended version, and I've made a few tweaks. So if you have seen my Brighton SEO talk, it may still be worth staying on, but there may be a few slides that you've heard before. So a little bit about me. I'm Beth Nunnington. I'm the PR director at performance marketing agency Journey Further. I've got over 10 years experience now driving organic performance for a lot of leading brands, including SES, Ann Summers and Villa Plus. As James said, I am going to be staying on at 3 o'clock and can answer lots of questions then. But if there's any points you want to make or if you want to ask me anything afterwards, then please feel free to message me on Twitter. My handle is @BethNunnington. So today I'm going to be talking you through the 4 steps that you can action to supercharge your PR strategy. So firstly, looking at the cross-channel data that you've got available to you to help inform your approach. Ensure relevancy and on-brand content is a key part of your strategy. Maintaining an always-on press office, as well as doing the bigger brand campaigns. And ensuring once you've got that amazing coverage and those links that you're amplifying it and making it work as hard as possible to prove even better return on investment. So to start with, digital PR, as we all know, is often used as a tactic to build links as a part of an overarching SEO strategy. But if you're just using digital PR as a tactic to build as many links as physically possible, then potentially you could be missing out on a bigger, more strategic opportunity. Because whilst doing PR is a great way to build high quality links, if executed properly, then fantastic PR coverage and links can also help increase brand awareness. It can reach lots of your in-market audience. It can build trust and advocacy. And importantly as well, it can really help you achieve those end goals in terms of increasing purchase intent and then leading to more sales and conversions, which is every marketeer's goal. So to start with, when putting your PR strategy together, it's really important that you gather as much insight and data as possible. And we actually have access to lots of different sources of data. So to start with, it's important to consider the brand. What's the brand vision? What are the key messages that we want to promote and that we want to make sure we're including in our PR materials and that we want our target audience to hear? What's the tone of voice? What's the proposition? Who are our customers? How do we know that the content that we're putting together is going to engage with them? Can we get access to persona data? From an SEO perspective, I know a lot of you will be using these tools already, but one thing I'm going to touch on a bit later on is actually using relevancy gaps in your backlink profile to inform your PR strategy. PPC, so not SEO and PPC can be quite separate, but actually if you can understand your PPC's most commercially valuable keywords, that can help inform your SEO strategy and your PR activities. You can help to understand which keywords you should be focusing on to support the PPC efforts. And then from a display perspective, I'm going to touch on this shortly, but you can actually understand more about your in-market audience through looking at programmatic placement reports, which can help inform your media list. And then finally, from a PR perspective, we've got lots of tools at our disposal. So we can look at BuzzStream, we've got Response Source, which is a great tool to understand what the journalists are currently writing about and what's trending, along with BuzzSumo. But I'm a little bit old school in that I really believe in the value of strong media relations and regularly speaking to journalists. So I think when you are starting out with putting your PR strategy together, it's really important to speak to the journalist that you want to contact, find out what time suits them, find out about the stories that they're looking for, and gather as much insight on your media landscape as possible. So I mentioned programmatic placement reports, and for those that don't know what I mean by that, so those annoying adverts, those display adverts that chase you around the internet after you've accepted cookies when visiting a website. Ultimately, if you're running or your client is running programmatic or display advertising, ask for the display report, because this will ultimately give you a list of publications where your in-market audience has visited after being on your website. So this is just an example report, but I think what's quite interesting here, you can see BBC Good Food is one of their most popular one with over 1 million impressions. But further down the list, you've got sites like Liverpool Echo, Birmingham Mail, Daily Record, Wales Online, so more regional press. And I think what's interesting when you're thinking about PR strategically, if you manage to get a great piece of coverage that's really relevant, it's full of key messages, and it's on a regional newspaper that might not, they might have an anti-linking policy, or they might only do no follow links. You can still prove the value of that coverage if you have a placement report like this, because you can say, well, look, it is a great publication because it's where our audience is visiting. There may not be a link, but there's wider PR benefit here. And also you can use it at the beginning of your campaigns as well to understand, okay, well, if these are the publications that we need to be focusing on, but also you can use this data to inform what sort of content you should be creating. So for BBC Good Food, for example, then clearly that audience is interested in recipes and food content. So data like this is really useful to start off with when you're putting together your PR strategy before you jump straight into the execution, before you start just coming up with ideas just to get as many links as possible. It's important to use as much data to take a more strategic approach when building links and doing digital PR. And I do talk a lot about relevancy, and it's something I focus a lot on at Brighton SEO, but relevant on-brand PR campaigns ultimately will make Google and your target audience happy. But I wanted to start off with, what do we actually mean by relevant? What do we mean by relevancy? Because I think there's been a lot of talk recently, which is fantastic, within the industry about relevancy and what we mean by relevant. And for me personally, I think when coming up with a PR campaign or a PR idea, there are 4 key elements that we need to be considering. So firstly, is it going to be of interest to the target audience? Is it something that they're going to engage? Are they going to click on? They're going to read? Does the brand have an authority to be speaking about the topic? So is it relevant to their products and services? Do they have a right to be talking about this idea or this content? Topical, so is the idea relevant to what's happening in the news at the moment? Is it trending? Is it going to be of interest to the journalists and what they cover? And finally, keyword relevancy. So does your idea and your campaign align to the keywords that you want to rank for? And for my Brighton SEO talk, I did actually do a poll a few weeks ago now, and I asked on Twitter, when people were putting together their digital PR campaigns, which factor did they consider the most important from a relevant perspective? And interestingly, topical and on the news agenda came out top, and keyword relevance and brand messaging actually came out much lower. But I'm hoping today, after this talk, that a lot of you will start to prioritize more around increasing keyword relevancy, because I really believe that when you're putting a digital PR strategy together, that ultimately needs to be a big focus, especially if, of course, your end goal is to increase organic rankings. So I just wanted to start with considering the value of each piece of coverage for Evans Cycles. It's a big bike retailer. So we have Time Out magazine, which is a big national publication with a large readership. And then we've got Tom's Bike Trips, which is a smaller, more niche blog. And I know a lot of us in digital PR very much, again, focus on building as many links, but also from websites with a high domain rating, high domain authority, depending on which tool you use. So if we were looking at that as a metric, then naturally you're going to think, well, Time Out is the best publication to secure that link in, because its domain rating is nearly double that of Tom's Bike Trips. And if we know that Google uses links to pass a vote of confidence for, then it's likely that we would be more excited about the Time Out piece. But if you look at the keyword relevancy, so I'll talk about it in a moment, but we have a tool which helps to measure how relevant a piece of content is in terms of keywords. You've got here, for the timeout piece, things like British Red Cross or basic plumbing, because the Evans cycles and the cycling mention is actually very small. Whereas compared to Tom's bike trip, the keywords coming out of that wider piece of the article are things like cycle tour, best touring bike, needs of cycle travelers. And that makes you question, actually, which piece coverage, which link is going to pass the most value? Is it Time Out magazine, or could it actually be Tom's bike trip? Just something I want you to consider as I keep chatting through some of this. And we were really excited, and I think a lot of the industry was really excited as well, when a few months ago, Google actually came out and supported our theory that relevancy is something that we need to take a lot more seriously, and we do need to be focusing more when putting our strategies together. And this is John Mueller, so he's a Google representative. It always makes me laugh when I see this picture, because he does look like he's in prison, but I'm pretty sure he's not. And he said he would tend not to focus on the total number of links, or the total number of domain links to your website, because we look at links in a very different way. Oh, it's not letting me change slides now. Oh, it is now. Sorry. So we know that Google ultimately has become a lot more intelligent now, and it does use natural language understanding and machine learning. And we believe that Google is trying to understand a website as if it was one online entity, because fundamentally it wants to still continue to give the best results for its end users, because it wants to maintain its position as, you know, the most popular search engine. And therefore we know, and Google have come out and said it really, that it's no longer enough to just get as many links as possible. It's not enough now to just be popular. You also need to be relevant. But how do you measure relevancy? And this is something that a few years ago we were discussing as a team, and it was quite difficult, because you could look at anchor text, but it didn't really give a lot away. You could potentially go back through your backlink profile and try and manually analyze the wider context of each piece of coverage. But that was very time consuming. And that's why we built our internal tool Salient. So Salient actually allows us to bulk upload our client's backlink profile and run it through a script. So it uses the IBM Watson API. And then the output we get, we basically get data that allows us to see how a machine, or in this case, a search engine, Google, is viewing that content. And we can aggregate the data and pull it into useful, pull out useful information from that. And ultimately, it looks at the keywords that Google is seeing that site as most relevant for. So as a real life example, something I've mentioned before is, say if we work with an online beds retailer, it might be that we upload their entire backlink profile. And what comes out is that Google is viewing that backlink profile as really relevant for king size beds or for mattresses, but actually there's a gap for children's beds. So we will take that data and we'll take that information, and we will then brainstorm, and then we'll prioritize focusing on children's beds and come up with some PR campaign and ideas around that. It's really that simple. So then I just wanted to touch on, how do you then increase relevance or relevancy? And really it's about quality over quantity. So as I keep saying, Google, it's absolutely about, it's no longer enough to just go out and get as many links as possible. They are looking for that relevant on-brand content. And as a result, I just wanted to take you through a bit of a case study of something that I used to do and now no longer do. So about 8 or 9 years ago, I worked at another agency, and at the time we worked for Evans Helshaw, and we created this beautiful on-site piece of content, which was interactive. It probably took a long time to build from a dev perspective. It was probably quite expensive, but it was beautiful, and it was beautifully presented, and at the time it was seen as something very pioneering. and one of the first examples of creative SEO. And you can see here from the Ahrefs screenshot that this piece of content actually got over 2,000 backlinks. And as a result, we won awards for this. It was seen as something very pioneering. And we got loads and loads of coverage, loads and loads of links. So it was seen as brilliant. And we were interested, thinking, 8 or 9 years on, how is Google viewing Evans Halshaw's link profile based on what we know now? So we uploaded Evans Halshaw's entire backlink profile. So not just these 2,000 links, but their entire backlink profile. And I mentioned at the beginning that we can aggregate the data into useful, readable information. And one ways we do that is by putting the data into a tree graph. So how this works is that the bigger the box on this chart, the bigger the box, the more relevant Google is viewing that website for that keyword when looking at its backlink profile. So whilst Evans Halshaw is the biggest, it's their brand name, so not surprising. What comes second is the term James Bond. And also within there, we've got things like future trends of web design, we've got newest web design trends, and we've got favorite Bond and favorite Bond girl, all of which are keywords that aren't very relevant to what Evans Cycles sell, what Evans Halshaw wants to see is new cars or car dealership or used cars. So this is why I think we do, hopefully it's a good example to show why I think we do need to be more strategic with our PR activity. And it's no longer enough to just come up with ideas and come up with things that are rooted in no insight just to get links. So it might be a really good idea and it might get loads of links, but if it's not relevant and it's not something that the brand could really be owning, then potentially, arguably, it could be doing more harm than good. So what I do now and what we do at Journey Further is we create a press office environment for an always-on approach to underpin the larger campaign activities. So we still do the bigger campaigns. We just ensure that they're relevant and they're on brand. But what we do is from day one, working with a client, we make sure that we're their eyes and ears and that we're offering what we describe as a press office, which I think is quite a traditional PR term, but also ultimately all the tactics that are involved in that are great ways of getting links, and I'm sure a lot of you are doing as well. But just in terms of the tactical toolkit, there's lots of things we can be doing, from putting forward expert comment, we can be newsjacking, jumping on the back of breaking news, we can be sharing just really useful tips and advice, again, like using our clients' own data, using Google Trends, supporting them with new product launches, awareness days. As long as there's a day that's relevant, then absolutely you can piggyback on the back of that and create content around that. So, and also as well, just good old-fashioned media relations. So building up relationships with journalists, letting them know what expert commentary you can provide them with, and building up those relationships so you get to the point where journalists are actually coming to you directly. And this tactic and this approach is a key part of the strategy because it will ensure that you're constantly building momentum. So you're getting a constant stream of links and brand mentions coming through, and that also will help build that brand salience as well from a brand awareness perspective. So I just wanted to take you through a case study of one of our clients' 24/7 blinds. And 24/7 Blinds is an online blinds retailer. I'm not sure how many of you will have heard of them, but you've probably heard of some of their competitors. So some of their competitors include the likes of Hillary's and also Dunelm, all of which are much bigger brands have a much bigger backlink profile. So how is an online blinds retailer with a smaller link profile ranking higher for key terms than the likes of Dunelm and Hillary's? So when we started working with 24/7 Blinds about just over 2 years ago now, we knew that we'd have to be pretty strategic in order to take on this challenge, to take on the likes of the bigger brands. And the way we did this is, I'm sure you're not surprised, is by increasing relevancy and being really focused on their products and making sure that we were increasing that. So the tree graph on the left is a snapshot of their relevancy backlink profile before we started working with them. So you can see blinds is very much to the right. It's very much a smaller box. So the brighter blue are kind of just pulling out what the most relevant key terms are that they want to be ranking for. And then you can see afterwards, we've actually increased relevancy for blinds by a lot. It's now their most relevant keyword in terms of their backlink profile. And we've also included there's new keywords in there as well, which is fantastic. So we've been able to really improve the relevancy. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, that's great, you know, you've increased the relevancy, but what does that mean? But as a result of that, oh no, sorry. So how we've done that is proving your relevance by focusing on the product coverage. So we, as I said, focus on a lot of product coverage. This is just a snapshot showing you some examples of that. And one of the things we jumped on, was Bridgerton at the beginning of the year. I'm sure you're aware the press seemed to go mad for it. So again, we were being relevant because we were jumping on the back of topical content, but we were creating a story around their products. So what products they had in stock that were potentially Bridgerton inspired. And we created a home interiors advice piece around that. So not only were we tapping into the news agenda, but we were putting forward relevant products. And so, as I was saying, what has this achieved? So the average rank has improved by 30%. We've increased the revenue, but now they're the third most visible blinds retailer. And ultimately, that was the end goal. And we haven't achieved that by just building thousands and thousands of links and trying to take them on from a volume perspective. We've been really strategic and we've been really targeted. And I understand that we obviously have our tool that we've created internally, but I wanted to share with you a free tool that you can access straight away, that you can check whether or not your content is relevant. And that can either be from a press release perspective or an on-site content piece. And I don't know if it's going to work, it says it's loading, so possibly it's not going to work, which is a shame. But what I can do is I can share the link. I think it's because it's a GIF that I've created, and I don't think my laptop can cope with it, so apologies. But what this slide should be is it's an IBM Watson tool, which ultimately allows you to copy and paste your press release, run it through the tool, and then it will give you a relevancy score, and it will pull out the keywords in that content, and it will give you a score out of 1. The closer to 1, the more relevant it is. Now, in my example, it's for Christie towels, and we're wanting to have keywords in there such as fluffy towels, white towels, etc. And it gives a relevancy score of about 0.6, 0.5. And something I'd just like to make you aware of is we don't want to do keyword stuffing. We don't want to try and make our press releases so relevant that a journalist is just going to look at it and be like, what does this mean? So I'll share the tool on Twitter afterwards. But ultimately, when you're using it, I'd probably go for a 0.5, 0.6 relevancy score, depending on the keywords that you want to rank for, and just be mindful of not overdoing it. But this tool is free, and it's just a really good way of sense checking, because as we know, some journalists are really busy, and a lot of the time they might just copy and paste your press release and pretty much put content up word for word. So if you've optimized it for keyword relevancy, then you're going to be in a really strong place. So finally, because you've taken a strategic approach, you've had all your data, you've created content that's on brand, it's going to be of interest to your target audience, it's relevant to your keywords, and it's going to support your rankings, and you've achieved those pieces of coverage and links and you're really proud of them, why stop there? Make them work even harder by then amplifying through social media. So this is just an example from Villa Plus, but ultimately we put some paid advertising against coverage and links that we got. And then if you have a display team or a programmatic team, then it's also possible to completely cover your coverage with programmatic as well, just to really make your coverage stand out. And something to mention here as well is we have actually split tested this with other campaigns. I actually did a campaign for Maryland Cookies about 2 years ago. So it's a bit of an old one, but we've done campaigns before where we split tested it. So we've had the social media ad going to the client's website, and then the social media ad going to a piece of coverage with the copy exactly the same. And we've got case studies of the ad that goes back to the coverage, despite adding an extra step in that customer's journey, ended up converting more sales because it's that third-party validation. That coverage, as I said, if it's on brand and it's full of key messages and it's positive sentiment, then that actually can potentially end up driving more sales, because it's that trust piece. It's that people are reading content that they trust, and it's that third-party validation that can potentially increase purchase intent. So just checking time, I'm actually a little bit early, but in terms of actionable takeaways, so the main things I'd love you all to take away is be strategic with your digital PR activity to drive wider marketing objectives. So try and think more like a marketer as opposed to just focusing on, the links and the PR side of things. Really focus on creating relevant and on-brand coverage to drive the best performance. As I said, you can then make it work so much harder. These link-based style creative campaigns will only get you so far now that Google is a lot more intelligent and is using machine learning. Having an always-on, especially product-focused PR approach can really help you target specific areas, especially getting links into those category pages. And then once you've got all your hard work and everything has come into fruition, make sure that does actually reach your in-market audience through social media amplification and making it work harder. So that is the end of the talk. But please let me know if you've got any questions. I know we're going on to the panel discussions now, so happy to answer them.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Beth. That was really great, really great session. And I think we can, we can all take quite a lot from that. And so I'm going to share a couple of questions that have come specifically for yourself before I invite the rest of sort of our panel attendees in. So the first question we've had, Beth, is how do you view keywords in an article, like with your timeout example?
So this is where we use Salient. So we can use Salient to analyze what the keywords are. However, when I actually get the slide working, if I send you a link to that free tool, you can do the same thing. You can just copy and paste. It's basically you just copy and paste any content and run it through this tool, and it will tell you what the keywords are and what the score is. So that's how we measured that.
Fantastic. And a follow-on from that we've had in is how do we get our hands on the Salient? Can others access this tool, or is it internal only at this point?
At the moment, it is internal only. If you are a brand, then we do offer free relevancy reports. I should have included that slide actually. So if you'd like to understand how relevant your backlink profile is, then we can run a report for you like we did with 24/7 Blind. So please do get in touch, because we are happy to run free reports. But at the moment, we haven't shared it publicly.
Okay, no worries at all. And then the last question that we've had through, actually two questions in one, which I think are the same. What tools do you use to create the tree graph? And secondly, what was the name of the tool that you can run press releases through?
To be completely honest with you, I don't know how we create the tree graph, because that's what the SEO team do, and they are much better with Excel and data manipulation than I am. But I will find out, and I'll speak to Steve, who's our technical director and innovation director. And I'll tweet it later.
Great.
If that's okay.
That'd be really great.
And just remind me what the second question was.
The second question was, what was the name of the tool that you can run press releases through?
So it's on the IBM Watson website, but it's a really long URL. So what I'll do is I'll tweet the link out very shortly, and then you can just click onto it, or I can send it to you, James, if you're sending anything around after.
Great. We're more than happy to. To share that out as well. If you could send us to that.